Welcome to Totally Talent Podcast by HR.com, your go-to source for all things talent. Whether you're looking for expert insights on high-volume hiring, the latest trends in recruitment technology, or strategies for building a winning team, we've got you covered. Join us for each episode as we dive deep into the challenges and opportunities shaping the talent landscape today. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Totally Talent on HR.com. I'm your host, Mike Wood, and I'm here with Deborah Kurtz from Magenta Search. Hi Deborah, how are you?
Hi Mike, I'm great. How are you?
Tell people a little bit about Magenta Search, just so they know about what you do.
Sure, absolutely. I started Magenta Search about 18 months ago. We are a boutique recruiting firm specializing in go-to-market roles, usually across high-growth companies, usually hovering around 100 million ARR and under. I work in B2B SaaS, healthcare tech, e-com, consumer brands, and the world of recruitment, the world of hiring has been really, we'll call it interesting over the past couple of years.
Interesting is a good word.
Yeah, we'll play it politically correctly and call it interesting. It's been a very dynamic roller coaster, choppy past 5 years, and I continue to see that, and obviously I can talk a lot about what I'm seeing, but I am on the front lines of seeing how companies hire, how companies make decisions, what interview processes look like. And I'm also on the front lines of working with the candidates who are like, why is this happening? Or how do I optimize the system? So it's been quite again, interesting, controversial, polarizing, challenging few years. And I love being on the front lines of it. I feel really privileged that I get to have an inside view into all of these things as they're developing.
Yeah, so I reached out because I really wanted to get your take on the mass transparency laws, just because we're both in Massachusetts. I've seen that the pay transparency laws are ramping up, and I think it was last week that they went into effect. Can you just describe a little bit about what we do in Massachusetts here for the pay transparency law, like the new kind of setup?
Yeah, totally. So the good news is I'm not a lawyer, so I am going to describe all these developments in the most commonplace of terms so that all of us can get our heads around it. Let's go back to 2018. It's important to understand that pay transparency started in 2018 when it became illegal for companies to inquire about salary history. So when I was in recruitment in 2018 and before, I used to ask candidates like you, I'd say, Mike, can you tell me, what are you currently earning? And it was very standard. And you'd say, I'm earning X. And my next question would be, okay, what are you targeting moving onwards? In 2018, that question became illegal. We cannot ask about salary history. The only thing that we can ask about is, what are you looking for moving forward? I personally am in total support of that development. In the recruiting circles, at first, it was like, oh my God, how are we going to gauge what we're going to compensate people? And it quickly emerged into, it doesn't matter. I mean, and it worked as I think it should have, which is, it doesn't matter what you were making. It matters what you need moving forward. And if it doesn't align, then it doesn't align. What has transpired as of October 29th, so just a week or two ago, Massachusetts came up to speed with some other states such as New York, California, Colorado. And there are three specific things that went into effect as of last week. And I'll just bullet point them here. The first and the most significant is around posting compensation and sharing compensation in job advertisements. So what that means, this has been true for some other states, but as of now in Massachusetts, when you go on LinkedIn and you look at a job and the job is in Mass, it has to have a salary range, a compensation range. It is illegal to not have that range posted. Additionally, if you're interviewing with a recruiter like me or a company or a hiring manager, whoever it may be, and you as a candidate says, can you tell me what the role is compensating? You legally are owed an answer. In the past, we could say things like, well, it's really going to depend, or, well, blah, 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 blah. We weren't held to giving an answer. as of now, we have to transparently and clearly say the compensation range is X to Y. That's the first thing. The second thing that is significant with this development is that companies can no longer threaten employees to not discuss their compensation internally. So, Mike, you and I work at the same company. In the past, and I have worked for companies that I've signed yes to this as part of your offer letter. It has stated you cannot discuss your compensation terms with any other employee in the company. That is considered illegal, and you'll be at risk for termination if you do so. And so the company was in a position of power to say you're not allowed to talk about it, or well, that's terms for termination. Now, Mike, you and I work at the same company. If you and I choose to have the conversation as to what are you earning, what am I earning, we can have that conversation without the threat of recourse of employment being threatened. So that's the second bullet point of what went into effect most recently. And then the third is around this internal piece, which really means, and please ask any questions you want on this, but it really means when a role is open in a company, the salary bands need to be legally need to be shared with the employees. That doesn't mean they need to send out an email and share it. I'm not saying that well. It means that, Mike, if you're a director of content at XYZ company and you see that your company posted a senior manager of content role, it is your right to know what they are compensating for that role. So this comes into play. The reason why this is significant is that if people stay at companies for a very long time, oftentimes if they get a 2 or 3% cost of living increase year after year and they're there for 10 years, their income is usually lower than if somebody joins the company today because the way market values have fluctuated and changed. And so that third internal component is meant to ensure that somebody is not being penalized or paid under market rate due to their loyalty at a company. And again, like all three of those bullet points does not automatically give any of us as employees. It doesn't automatically give us anything. It just gives us a right to ask the questions and the right to get the information.
I think so. There's a couple things here that stand out. I think in the internal piece really kind of gets me because it's saying something that you know that like if you stayed at a company for 5 years, you're getting a 1%, 2% cost of living increase, whatever. Meanwhile, inflation's bringing everything up that same amount. You realize that they're going to have to hire someone if they're hiring on your team that like that
Right.
rate's got to go up. Where I worry about it is, let's say I get promoted internally and I take on a new position, and can now anybody in the company like just ask what's that role payout?
No. And that's important clarification. I don't think the language that I've seen around this law being these laws being rolled out as of October 29th, I don't think it's been excellently communicated. It does not mean if you're working for a private company or even a public company, it does not mean that salaries are now open to be shared with anyone. If you work for the government, we know that government roles salaries are posted because they're funded by taxpayers. So in Massachusetts, you want to see what a judge is being paid. That is public information. But you're working at, it can be a publicly traded company, but this does not mean that salaries are now open to anyone who wants to know what Mike is getting paid, what Deb is getting paid.
Right.
That is still proprietary information. What it does mean is that if you want to ask me what I'm getting paid and I choose to tell you, I can do that without fear of recourse. But it does not translate positions or salaries or compensation packages. If you think about the government, it's public information what a judge in Massachusetts is being paid.
Yep.
It's public information as to what a superintendent is being paid. That does not bring us in corporate America. It does not bring us into that world. And I think the language on it has not been fantastic because I've gotten that question multiple times. Like, oh my God, does that mean people will know what I'm making? It does not mean that. And no company would start saying like, oh, you're curious what Deb's being paid? Sure, here's that information. That is not what's happening.
Well, it's a catch-22 in my eyes because for years I've heard you don't talk about salary, you don't talk about salary, you don't talk about even what your house is worth, full pot. You don't
Right.
want to talk about that, but that's public information. But I mean, maybe this will help elevate some of the, because it's a lot harder to be kind of shifty about how you're paying people when everything has to be transparent and in the open. Um,
Except that not everything has to be transparent and open.
mhm.
So we have to pay close attention to what the law says, because what we are seeing, and this will probably continue to happen, we are seeing roles that are posted that say I'm paying between 75 and 150,000, which
Yes.
is ridiculous. So now, a question about, will there be penalties for that kind of ridiculousness, or will there be penalties if you post a role on LinkedIn and you're in Massachusetts and you don't post the salary range? Right now, I have not seen it being policed. So I don't know what, again, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know what the government has in terms of planning for how they're going to enforce this. I haven't seen it get enforced across New York or California or Colorado, places where it's already been. But it is not, it gives employees the option of not facing recourse in the event that these conversations are had. And I think it's going to be it's a dangerous conversation to have, because if you and I want to compare salaries, one of us is going to earn more and one of us is going to earn less. And it means from this conversation, one of us is going to walk away disgruntled. So my advice, just before anyone has that conversation, is to just think about, one's going to get more and one's going to get less, and think about how you want to react to that or what you want to do with that information. Money does, funny things to people. It's emotionally driving. So I would say, think about what you want to do with that information and how you're going to handle that information if and when you get it.
So, quick story time. I was working for a tech startup in the Southborough/Framingham area. If you know,
Oh, we
what I'm
love the
talking.
Southborough area.
Yeah. And I happened to go to the copy machine one day to get something that it was also the printer. So it was the office printer and stuff. So I went to get something that I just printed off, and I grabbed something off the tray, which I thought was mine. No, it was essentially a salary breakdown of everybody I work with. And I saw this thing, and I went, ah! And I threw it away. But now I have that information, and that
Yeah.
information sat in my head for so long because I didn't want to know this, but I don't want to know what my boss makes. So I would caution people. You'd say, if you're gonna try to find out some of this information, think about how you would react if it wasn't positive news. So
Right. Right. And there's also, again, salary ranges do exist. And yes, putting something up for 75 to 150 is too big of a range, in my opinion, to be valid. But you could absolutely post a role paying 300 to 375. And that
yep.
feels pretty valid to me. So that's the same compensation swing of $75,000. But because the numbers are higher, the percentage is lower. And I I just put up a LinkedIn. Actually, this is the LinkedIn post that started you and I chatting, which is, it is very human nature to see a salary range and to assume that you're going to qualify for the upper end of it. And you may not. Um, in fact, companies should, recruiters, hiring managers, whoever we're talking about representing the company, they should get good at talking about what this range means and who qualifies for what range without making it personal to the candidate. Because if a company posts that the range is 150 to 175, then the next human nature is going to look at
Yeah.
that and say, oh great, I can make 175 in this job, and I'm sure that number is going to go into the brain. When the offer comes in at 150, that's going to feel awful. I mean, this is the problem with pay transparency, is that it makes it harder to not offend people when the numbers are not high. My advice on that is that if you have an excellent candidate and you're considering for a role that's 150 to 175, but you're thinking about them in the 150 range, talk about it early, explain to them why, and hopefully the explanation would not be, we just don't think that highly of you, but the explanation may be something around years of experience
Yeah,
or
you're on the
technical.
junior end of this, and we
Yeah,
want
you're
you to
right. Yeah.
be able to
Yeah.
grow
Listen.
in the
Yeah.
position.
And there are ways, we're super excited about you and we want to continue forward. We want to do a pulse check based upon your experience. We are viewing you in the 150 range for this position. I want to make sure that that's comfortable for you. Oh my God, no, I would need 175. I can't afford 150. Okay, have the conversation earlier, not later when
Exactly.
people
Yep.
are, and that's exactly what I was saying on LinkedIn is there are ways to have these conversations to not only save time and energy, but also it doesn't need to be quite so personal. It doesn't need to be, the notion of getting a lowball offer feels awful to people. Corporate America is not in the business of inflating people's egos. Like they're in the business of making money. So corporate America doesn't owe it to anyone to make anyone's ego feel good, but we're in the business of hiring. So if you want to hire this person, it's in your best interest to set the stage so that you get them on board in a positive manner, not in a, I'm going to kick you in the shins and offer what you're going to perceive as a lowball offer and hope you accept.
Yeah. So I want to either dispel a myth or elevate a conspiracy theory. Like, tell
Okay.
me that. Yeah. Tell me, like, when you're hiring and you have a range between 160 and 170, whatever, and you have one guy at 165, and then you have another at 163. Are your executives really like jazzed up that you got the person for $2,000 cheaper if you go with the 163
I
person?
can only answer for the world that I work in, and the answer is
Yeah.
no. I mean,
Okay.
100% no. Um, where a company may be jazzed up about somebody less expensive, it might be a 10K swing if we're talking
Yeah.
about 190 versus 180. But even I tend to work on roles that are director level through EVP, SVP level. I've certainly done plenty of lower level roles in my career as well. So again, like the lower money we're talking about, if somebody, the difference between a $40,000 offer and a $42,000 offer is way more significant than an offer that's like 250 or 252. I have not found, most of my clients are not, and clients for me are the companies that I hire
Yeah.
for. Usually money matters, but it's within parameters that money
Yeah.
matters. So no, I'm not usually seeing a difference of 2000. It is one piece of the puzzle that if somebody is significantly more expensive and they're not better, I do see
That makes sense.
that somebody more junior might be asking for more money. This is interesting because as we've moved into remote work, we can run into problems where somebody in New York City is going to need X, whereas somebody in a lower cost of living location can require less. It hasn't worked as well as companies have hoped. Like when remote hiring went into place with the pandemic, there was this hope that now I can hire people in Montana and pay them according to a low cost of living location. It hasn't worked out that way, in that most of the candidates that my clients want to hire are still in the high cost of living areas by nature of the work that I do. But that's where it can get a little bit sticky. And actually, just on a broader scale, back to these issues, is that if you have a company that's headquartered in, say, St. Louis, and they have remote employees, you can have people with the same titles working in St. Louis and working in New York and have very different compensation packages. And
Yep.
that's it's really sticky. I've absolutely run into that in my career for sure.
Now, would you actually like? Are there recruit? And this, I'm going to overgeneralize. So
Sure.
I'll see job postings. It'll be like no applicants from Colorado or no applicants from, any of these like higher transparency, that type of thing. Like, does this actually hurt sometimes the candidates that are in those high cost of living areas?
So there are two different issues that we're conflating here. One is the salary, like what is it going to cost to hire somebody who's sitting in San Fran or New York? That's one issue. The issue you're talking about, and that's just cash. Can I afford somebody who resides in San Fran? The issue that you see of we're hiring remotely but no applicants from these states, that's actually usually a tax issue.
Okay.
I'm not educated enough to get into the tax reasons why, and it's usually the big companies that are the ones that are sensitive to it. So, for example, I've hired for an international global company. They were building out like a UX. They were not very UX focused, and so they worked with me because they had a whole big recruiting team, but it was for different things. They wanted to work with me to build for a very specific flavor of user experience professionals. And they could hire remotely, but they had a list of states that they could hire from. So, and that
It's
was for
more
tax.
tax. Yeah, it's more tax purposes then. That makes sense.
Exactly. So I wouldn't tell somebody from a candidate perspective, if you live in California or Colorado, like, don't worry. I mean, that's where you live. Like, we can't control, there are things we can't control, and I wouldn't worry too much about any of it. But yes, there are some companies that can only hire from certain places, and they're clear about that. Um, we've also seen a big swing in remote work, and where that's heading. Remote work certainly still exists, but
Yeah, I haven't been back to an office in 5 years. Last office I went to, I think Massachusetts got hit with COVID around St. Patrick's Day of
yeah,
2020, and so I left the office and I never went back. Like my stuff
yeah,
got
I
mailed to me like a year later.
Yeah, I actually had the exact same story, which we were working in a WeWork in March of 2020, and they made the announcement that the St. Patrick's Day parade was canceled, and we couldn't believe it. And we went home and we never came back. And I don't work for that company anymore. I now work on my own. But Mike, there is a huge return to office. I mean, we've been hearing a lot about it. There is a huge return to office mandate. Um, and there are
We
a lot of
get it.
different reasons for it.
Yeah.
I mean, as I say to candidates, like, you need to make the decisions that make sense for your career and for your lifestyle. There are going to be companies that are open to remote. There are going to be companies that aren't. And it's not your job to try to make them change their minds. It's probably not in your best interest to get into an interview process if it's on site 3 days a week and you're hoping they'll drop it down to two. That's probably not a good way to spend your time, because the likelihood that they will drop it down to two for you is very slim. Although we did see some of that flexibility in the last few years, but that's not how the game is being played anymore.
I see. I work. I love remote work, but I worry that, and I just wrote something about this yesterday, that we're pricing Americans out of jobs because if you're hiring remote, that means you can hire anywhere. So you can even hire overseas or whatever. And there are tons of people that have like if you're hiring a marketing manager, there are marketing managers in the Philippines that make like 10% of what an American would make. And so it's just like I feel like
There's a
people are
lot.
going to have to go back into the office at some point because if they want fully remote, they'll just go and offshore.
So this is a really white hot topic, which you and I are not going to be able, we're not going to have the time or the intelligence. I mean, the layers of complexity to it. It brings up tax issues. It brings up political
Yeah.
issues. It brings up social issues. Like, it's such a big thing. And people have very, as we said, they're passionate about people. It's white hot and it's polarizing. There are pros and there are cons. What I am seeing is that smaller companies are still motivated to be remote because it saves cost. Offices are expensive, and that saves cost. And it gives them flexibility as to where they can hire. In the world that I work in, I am not seeing, oh my God, we now have an influx. We have so many workers now in Alaska. Like, that is not how I'm still seeing the regions, the cities. We've seen a suburban sprawl. Like, now it's easier for people to live farther outside of major hubs of cities because they're not commuting in 5 days a week. Maybe they're doing it 2 days a week, or maybe they're not doing it at all. So I am still seeing the startups lean on remote work, but that's also not entirely true. I know plenty of startups who are like, we need to be together. We need to be able to brainstorm and ideate, and that can't happen remotely. And we've seen all the headlines of the Amazon back to work 5 days a week, which was not nearly as effective as they wanted it to be in having people leave the company, because as we saw last week,
Well, it's like, I
tens
mean,
of thousands of
if I
layoffs.
worked 5 days a week in Boston, so let's say I took a job in Boston, it would pay me a lot more than what I make now, but I'd have to spend an hour each way going into the city.
So that's actually really interesting. I'll give you an example that I placed a candidate with a Series C fintech company in New York City. They're in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, and I placed a position for them recently. And the candidate resides in New Jersey, and the candidate, the company has a 3-day on site requirement: Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The candidate they wanted to hire was fine with that, but he had been working remotely for the last 5 years, and he said, great, I'm fine to go on site. I'm excited, I want to go to Manhattan, I'm tired of being at home. Here's the thing: the cost of commuting, it, the cost of commuting is really significant. So when we were talking about his package, we had to make sure that the compensation package was going to be aggressive enough to not only give him a bump as incentive to make a move, but also to cover the cost of commuting. Because if it didn't, then all of any bump he got in making this career move would just go to cover commuting and end him in the exact same place. So that's something that's been challenging for companies, because companies didn't drop salaries when we stopped commuting, but now they're finding that they need to make sure that they're covering the cost of commute in order to bring a remote employee or a hybrid employee into an office more frequently.
Yeah, like if I had to go into Boston every day,
Yeah.
even if I drove, I
Hmm.
can't imagine what that cost would be for a year. I
I
know
can
at
tell
one
you.
point I was taking the train, and the
Yeah,
train is a luxury. It actually costs more to take the train than it would to
I
drive it
know.
in park at that
I
time.
know. Well, and I can tell you, I mean, ballpark from where you live in Mass and in Boston, it's easily $500 to $600 if you're going to take the commuter rail easily, and that's not taking into account driving to a commuter rail lot and
Yeah,
daytime parking. And then if you're not taking the commuter rail and you're driving and parking easily, I mean, a parking spot in anywhere in Boston monthly is, I mean, easily $500 to $600 a month for garage parking, blah blah blah. In the heart of the city, where, and this
yep,
is true across. These numbers are different with different cities, but it's um it's really challenging, and it has added to cost of living and where salaries need to, why the demand for salaries have continued to go up. And yeah, it's just really tricky. And I mean, the I work to educate both candidates and hiring companies to say these are the things we need to take into consideration when we're building out a role or building out the compensation package. And then to candidates as well, these are the things: what can you afford to do, both with your time, your family? What can't you afford to do? If you have to work remotely, if you cannot go on site, then that's fine. Just know that you're going to be competing for less jobs with more people. And again, for everyone has to make their own decision based upon what works for them.
yeah. Well, it's clear we're still in this transition period from COVID 5 years ago, and like I don't, we've never really kind of settled into the new norm of work. Uh, yeah.
No, I don't think we have. And I think, I mean, the next as AI comes into play, I feel like AI is finally putting the COVID stories to rest. And I feel like this debate over is remote better or is in office better, companies are saying this is what we're doing. Choose your hard, choose your poison. Work here, don't work here. Amazon did exactly that: 5 days a week in office, work here or don't work here. I feel like the next focus is, how does AI impact our lifestyles, the work that we do, where we need to be to do the work. So it continues to be a complex time, Mike.
Yeah, well, it's definitely something that we don't have time for now. So I wanted to thank you for joining me this morning. Always great talking with you, and we jumped around, but
Absolutely.
thank you
Thank you
for explaining the pay transparency thing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for having me. And the pay transparency in my personal, the last sort of headline, I think it's all good things. I do. I think it's all positive. It's all good. I I just encourage everyone needs to be a little bit more thoughtful about how they approach. And I think it will move us forward in the best of ways. We just need to be thoughtful about how we're handling the new developments.
Well, thank you, Deborah Kurtz. She's from Magenta Search. Check her out on LinkedIn, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for tuning in to the Totally Talent podcast by HR.com. We hope you find today's episode insightful and inspiring. Don't forget to explore more episodes and discover valuable resources at hr.com/podcasts, where you can listen to all of our podcasts. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and making a difference in the world of talent.